Hello, my name is Ben Schrag. I am a program director here in the National Science Foundation's Small Business Programs. And today I'll be talking through the Phase I full proposal submission process and some guidance about how this applies to the 2024 solicitation, which opened up in June 4 and will last through November 2025. So the full proposal is actually the second formal step in our Phase I application process. Prior to that, you'll have to submit a project pitch on our website. If you have not yet submitted a project pitch and been invited to submit the full proposal, I'd recommend you go ahead and not worry too much about the contents of this video at this time. seedfund.nsf.gov is our website, and that's where you submit the project pitch. And you can also learn more about that process at that website. The full Phase I proposal is something that you probably only want to dive into once you're past that first step. We also have a video that covers an introduction to the program and talks. That is at our YouTube channel, and you can find it again at seedfund.nsf.gov. So just a reminder, the Phase I project is the first step in this process. There's also then a Phase II and Phase IIB. We won't talk too much about anything past Phase I here. There'll be plenty more information about Phase II and Phase IIB as you move your way into the Phase I award process. I will point out that the amounts of Phase I and Phase II have changed with this solicitation. You can see them here. These are amounts that are essentially close to the congressional limit for the program. So there's a few kind of key pieces in the Phase I full proposal process. I did mention you do need to submit a project pitch and receive an official invitation by email to submit a full Phase I proposal. Once that's done, the next steps are registrations. These are things that you have to do to get your company set up in various government systems so that you're allowed to submit and compete for a Phase I award. We'll talk about the three sites, but they are sam.gov, research.gov, and SBIR.gov. Then you'll put together your proposal. When in doubt, remember that the key document that is the go-to source for information about the Phase I proposal process and what goes in the Phase I proposal is called the solicitation. You can always go to our website and find links to the current solicitations for both Phase I and Phase II at seedfund.nsf.gov/solicitations. And then you're going to want to submit your proposal to one of the upcoming deadline dates. The solicitation will be open continuously, more or less, between now and November 2025. And so these windows are open all the time. Once one closes, the next one opens the next day. But in order to get the fastest proposal processing, the recommendation is that you go ahead and try to submit your proposal close to the end of one of the windows. So close to, but not after, one of the dates listed here on the slide. Just a few things for those of you who have project pitch invitations that precede the solicitation. We have changed the way that we create invitations and the amount of time that they last. And so the current process is that if you submit a project pitch today and receive an invitation for a Phase I proposal, you'll get a timeline to submit that proposal, which basically includes the current open submission window for Phase I and then the entire Phase I. But prior to this summer, we had given folks a full year to submit their Phase I proposal. So the amount of time you'll get based on an invitation will have changed. But I will point out that in any case, when you're invited to submit a Phase I, you're sent an email saying that email gives you a certain amount of time to submit. And in all cases, that email will be honored so that the email, what it says is what goes. So if you're not sure how much time you have to submit your Phase I full proposal, please go back to that email invitation and reference what was included in that text. For those of you who have gone through this process before, maybe you're familiar with a Phase I full proposal, I want to cover a few things that have changed in this solicitation. You probably already noticed the first change is that we have increased the amount of Phase I from 275,000 to 305,000. The next big change is that letters of support, which have been optional for a long time in the Phase I proposal, are now no longer permitted. Letters of commitment, which is a different kind of thing, which is something that basically has to do with individuals or entities who are actually part of your budget, who are actually working directly with you on the project, receiving funding from the budget. Those are still allowed and required, and they should basically be very straightforward and explain that the entity or individual is willing to fulfill the role that you've dedicated to them in the project. But letters that basically are supporting, giving detailed commentary about the value of the technology or the market or the use case are no longer permitted. And if you are submit a proposal with letters of support, you'll be asked to remove them. As I mentioned, project pitch invitations are now going to give you slightly less time to prepare your Phase I proposal. Our submission windows are about 4 months long in most cases. And so you're going to be given a whole window plus whatever's left in the current window, which is to say, you'll generally have between 4 and 8 months to submit the Phase I proposal after the invitation is given. We've also changed slightly the contents of the project description. The project description, for those of you who are new, is the kind of core of the proposal document. It's 15 pages and it covers all the key technical and commercial questions. So take a look in the solicitation about the changes that have been made. We have changed the programming for Phase I awardees. So we have, for about a decade, offered what we called the Beat the Odds Bootcamp to all of our Phase I awardees. Starting with this solicitation now, all Phase I awardees will no longer go through the bootcamp. They will go through the full NSF I-Core program. We've also modified the guidance about the budget to ask folks to include funding that will support your time and potentially your travel as you do go through the I-Core and conduct your customer discovery interviews. We have also changed the Phase I to allow you to budget up to $6,500 for what we call technical and business assistance. This is something that basically allows you to spend a small amount of money on non-technical work. As most of you know, the funding that we provide in all cases, except for a couple of exceptions, is for research and development. This TABA funding is one exception. So you're allowed to actually spend that $6,500 directly on non-technical things, including commercialization focused activities like P protection, attending trade shows, things like that. You can read more about the TABA funding in the Phase I solicitation, but it is also something where you would potentially be allowed to budget that $6,500 without necessarily locking yourself into a specific activity. One thing I will say, just to stress about this TABA allocation, is that it has to be allocated through a third-party vendor. So you can give it to an individual or an institution outside your company, but you cannot spend TABA funds on internal company activities. So in other words, you can't spend it on paying your own employees or doing things inside your company. The last change is that we've expanded the opportunity for Phase I projects to be longer if needed. You're now allowed to choose a duration for your projects between 6 and 18 months based on how long you think the appropriate timeline is. So this is a screenshot of our website. Again, seedfund.nsf.gov. Just wanted to point out the top right, there is a drop-down menu that has been highlighted called How It Works. There's a lot of great information there for folks who are new on the process, on the full proposal, on the project pitch. And so I would encourage folks to just browse through that if you haven't already. A lot of the information that I'll be providing here is also included there. So I mentioned after you're invited, the next thing you need to do is to submit 3 registrations. And these are, again, the 3 registrations. I will point out SAM.gov is actually a federal-wide requirement. So anyone who wants to ask the federal government for money has to be registered in SAM.gov. SAM.gov is a separate federal agency. It's not something NSF controls, and so we can't necessarily help you with that process. It is sometimes a process that can take weeks and can be a little bit tricky to navigate. And so we recommend, especially for SAM.gov, that you start early. Research.gov is NSF's own platform that we use to take in proposals and to conduct most of our business with the external community. You're probably not going to be able to actually even start the process of registering research.gov until you have an active SAM.gov registration. So SAM.gov really is first for a reason. It's the first thing you should tackle here. Finally, the last registration is the SBIR company registry. This is through the SBIR.gov website. And it's something that everyone who competes for SBIR awards at any federal agency needs to do. The third registration is not going to actually stop you from the first two registrations or from putting in your proposals. So the SBIR.gov registration is important, but is not quite as time sensitive and urgent as some of these other two registrations. So just walking through what these three registrations look like. This is the SAM.gov screenshot. The actual specific link to start the registration in SAM.gov is down at the bottom of the slide here. Again, SAM.gov is run by a different federal agency, the GSA. And so if you need any help with that process, you would want to reach out directly to their help desk. Research.gov, again, is what you'll be working in as you prepare your proposal. It is NSF's site. We administer it and we support it. You're going to register your company in the administration section, and then you're going to prepare your proposal in the prepare and submit proposals section. And I will point out the proposal submission system is modular. You can go in and log out and go back in and continue as many times as you want. So there's no reason that you shouldn't at least start the beginning of the skeleton of the proposal as soon as you're able to do so in research.gov. It's actually quite interesting and I think helpful to understand, to go in there for the first time and see all the different pieces and what you need to do. I think it helps to provide some structure to the proposal submission process. So I would really recommend for folks to, once you're active in research.gov, hit the button to prepare and submit proposal, do the first few steps to kind of create the structure, and then you can quit and come back later and do pieces, as you go. I will point out there's one piece of this process, especially that is a little bit confusing to folks, which is there's two different roles that NSF has that do different things in the proposal submission process. The principal investigator is the person who does most of the creating of all the documents for the proposal and the uploading of things. And for most of the time, putting your proposal together, it'll be the PI who's logged in doing those pieces. But there are certain pieces that a different permission, the organizational representative or AOR, is going to need to do. These folks could be the same person, but you have to actually allocate the rights to these two things separately. And the especially important thing is that at the end of the process, when you're ready to finally submit your proposal formally to NSF, the PI needs to push a button, and then the AOR needs to push a button to finalize the submission. And in many cases, when you're down to the wire at the deadline, and you're taking those last few steps, if you don't have this process locked in, if you haven't given someone the AOR rights to make that final step, it can be very stressful, and it can also lead to you even missing the proposal deadline. So we recommend that you figure out the AOR quite early in the process, give somebody those rights, and then you'll be prepared to take the final steps when you need to submit the proposal to NSF. The last registration is, again, SBIR.gov. The full link is down at the bottom. The link has recently changed a couple months ago. And so you should be able to find it, but it may be a different URL than you're used to. I haven't talked about this yet, but for those of you who are not familiar, we do have two different kind of flavors of program here, SBIR and STTR. We really recommend, you're going to have to make a decision which of these types of proposals to pursue pretty early in the process. They're based in most ways. The only difference between SBIR and STTR is how the budget is allocated. SBIR they're both led by a small business. SBIR means that the small business can work with other entities, but does not require any specific partnership or allocation of funds to a different entity. In SBIR, 2/3 of the funding has to go through the small business, which is to say, if you're going to bring in consultants or subawards, the amount of budget you can put into those things maxes out at 1/3 of the total amount. STTR is small business technology transfer. It requires that the small business lead the project and that they partner with and issue a subaward to a not-for-profit research institution. And there are amounts of the budget that have to be met. So at least 40% of the budget has to stay in the small business, and at least 30% has to go into that single subaward to the partner research institution, and the remaining 30% can be allocated however you like. And so the best way to make this decision, honestly, is to lay out the work you need to do in your phase 1 project, figure out if the best way to do that work is to allocate a significant amount of funding to a university or other research institution. And if the answer is yes, then STTR may be your path. You can obviously outsource more of the funding under STTR than you can under SBIR. If you want to do most of the work at the small business, maybe you want to outsource some of the work, but not a big chunk, then SBIR is probably more appropriate. I will point out that in some cases, we will ask you and work with you to potentially change the flavor of the award that we're going to make. That's not going to have any negative effect on you, but in some cases, the proposal you submitted may make more sense for us to work with you to issue as the opposite type of phase 1 award. Again, when in doubt, go back to the solicitation document. It's at our website, but if you want to Google it, you can Google the number. The NSF Phase I solicitation that's active is NSF 24-579. And so I would bookmark that immediately, if not sooner. The solicitation, this is kind of a table of contents of it. It is a long document. It does cover lots of different pieces. In my experience as a PI, and I think from feedback from the community, the really key piece of this document is Section 5. Section 5 is talking about exactly what the proposal is, the sections, what the sections should have, what the guidance is on how long things should be, and so anything you need to kind of figure out what goes in the proposal is Section 5, especially Section A and B there. So would recommend that again you read through that pretty thoroughly before you start diving into the proposal contents. The key piece of the document, and again, this is all talked about in the solicitation, is the project description. The sections that are recommended are here. Again, there is a fair amount of fluidity and flexibility to the proposal, but in general, this is the format that we suggest. The elevator pitch is summary of the whole project, and then we kind of go through the major pieces, including the commercial opportunity, what your technical solution and innovation is, what your company and team look like, and then a pretty detailed section about what the work you're going to do in phase 1 is, and what the outcomes and what the figures of merit for success would be. And then finally, there are 1 to 2 pages talking about the broader impacts of the project, which is to say, include above and beyond the kind of commercial case for your innovation and your product, what other impacts that are non-kind of economic would you hope to have happen based on your product going into the market. And so this is a way to talk about all the non-economic, non-monetary impacts of your projects, and obviously it is one of our core 3 merit criteria, so very important. Quick note on the project description. This is a section of the proposal that is the core and the heart of the arguments. As I mentioned, the format has changed. The different things that are included basically are the same, but the order and the kind of structure here has been modified a bit. So the project description cannot be more than 15 pages maximum. The first section, which is intellectual merit, will be a combination of discussing your technical innovation in detail, and then also the phase 1 R&D plan. We recommend between 7 and 10 pages for that. Then there's a section about the company and team. And again, there's more detail on the solicitation about exactly what questions we're hoping that you answer in these sections, followed by 1 to 2 pages on the broader impacts, including, non-economic, non-commercial outcomes of the product and the company being successful. And then finally, a discussion of the commercial opportunity with a special focus on the beachhead customer and the beachhead value proposition for your product. I will point out again the page numbers here for the recommendations in some cases may add up to more than 15 pages, but you cannot make the project description more than 15 pages. So you could not choose the maximum number of these recommended lengths. You'll have to decide how you want to allocate those 15 pages. One thing I wanted to point out is that in your budget, you're going to list various folks working on the project. There are 2 lines of the budget where you can list people who are going to get supported by the Phase I project. One is line A, which is senior personnel, and the other is line B, which is other personnel. For senior personnel, if you list anybody on line A, and by definition, you always have at least one because the principal investigator is always going to be on line A. So for anyone on line A, you are going to be required to include 4 additional documents, kind of giving more detail about that person. The biographical sketch, current and pending support, collaborators and other affiliations, and synergistic activities. I'm not going to go through these in a huge amount of detail, but I will point out that some of them are submitted through kind of a fairly rigid structure that you're going to have to prepare through a different website. In one case, the Science CV, which is the biographical sketch and current and pending support, you're going to have to actually go to that site to prepare those forms. And again, there's a fair amount of detail in solicitation, and there will be some links on my next slide about that process. If you have any questions about any of these, you can always reach out to us, and I'll give some points of contact at the end of the proposal, at the end of the presentation, I should say. Here's some links regarding the kind of senior personnel documents that I talked about. So there's some video tutorials, some written documents and help guides, and then if you want to check the policy guidance, there's also links directly to NSF's policy documents explaining what the requirements are for the bio sketches and for current and pending support. This slide deck, if you're not able to access the links here, this slide deck is available. It will be posted on seedfund.nsf.gov in the how it works section. So here's a screenshot of research.gov, and basically this site that you will see as you start the full Phase I proposal. So if you're logged in as a PI, as a principal investigator, and you go to the section about letters of intent and proposals, you're going to prepare a full proposal. It's important because some people get confused about which of the options you choose. So you are going to choose full proposal, not letter of intent, and that should probably be the only option I think that you're given if you choose the correct solicitation. But please be aware that the project pitch process does not count as a formal letter of intent. There is no formal letter of intent for our Phase I process. One other great link that I think is helpful as you go through the full proposal process is at our website, seedfund.nsf.gov/apply/full-proposal. This is basically a step-by-step guide that will walk you through the screens that you're going to run into as you put together the full proposal. There's also videos, including probably this video, and also, a bunch of other links that are helpful there. So that's also something I would recommend that you bookmark. Just want to cover a little bit about the review process. This is discussed in other places, but after your Phase I proposal is submitted, here's the kind of some pieces about what's going to happen. We do have an external peer review process. What that means is that the program director is going to recruit technical and commercial experts that are focused on the areas that are relevant to your proposal. We're going to swear them to secrecy, and we're going to give them some time to take a look at your proposal, to write up feedback, And then in many cases, we're going to get a group of proposals and a group of experts together in what we call a panel review to discuss your proposal. And they're going to be reviewing on these criteria, and they're going to write up feedback, access to that feedback, and there will be at least 3 reviewers assigned to every full proposal. And so you'll get at least 3 sets of feedback, whether or not you're funded, about how the reviewers felt about your proposal according to these review criteria. So very briefly, the first criteria is intellectual merit. For SBIR, STTR proposals, this is really about the novelty, the innovation in your technology, whether it represents what we think is a different, defensible, and potentially better approach that's going to solve a problem that no one else can solve and create a competitive advantage for your company in the market. And we want to see that our funding, our R&D funding, is going to be critical, because right now the technology is not quite ready yet. It's still risky. And so we want to see that the technology has a big potential, and we want to see that our funding is critical in taking the next step toward realizing that potential. And so the intellectual merit is about the sections of the proposal where you talk about what is your innovation, what is your new approach that's going to make your solution better, and then what is the next steps that, what are the next R&D steps that you're going to take with NSF support to bring that risky, innovative approach toward becoming a proven, reliable product that the customer can count on. Broader impacts is the second criteria. This is, again, like, if your product does get reduced to practice, if it starts to work, if you can make it work, and your customers can start to use it, and it can get out there into the world, how is that going to help not just your customer narrowly, but society broadly? What specific outcomes can we count on? Is it going to help improve the health of a certain group of people? Is it going to help environmental cleanup, climate change? Is it going to help social justice, or law enforcement, or whatever, international relations? Is there something beyond the fact that your company is going to sell a product and make money and hopefully create jobs? Is there something else that will result from your company starting to get your commercial business model executed and get your product out into the world? So you really want to talk about those other kind of second order effects of your business being successful in the broader impact section. And then the commercial potential section is really about understanding if NSF funding is granted here, whether you have the pieces in place to take the R&D funding, take the outcomes of the R&D, and do all the non-technical work that is going to be required to actually get your product out into the world, start solving problems for your customers, and then obviously extract value from them to continue to grow your company. Most of the companies we fund are brand new startups, and without finding a business model that makes sense, they're not going to potentially last very long. So we want to see that we feel like there's the structure and the team and the understanding in place that this is going to be the start of something big. And so the last thing I would say is, we're not looking for a full business model and a full understanding of exactly, everything about your customer, but we do want to see, even in phase 1, that you're talking in detail about who your customers are, especially your first few customers, and what value proposition you're starting to validate that will make your product successful commercially. Last bullet point here, just one last point about that. We are hoping that our funding is going to be catalytic for your company, not just because it's catalytic and it's going to make the technology work, but it's going to be a turning point, hopefully, for your company in its journey to success. And so for companies that do have a lot of prior funding, do have a lot of either government or private sector funding, we are going to start to ask the question about whether additional NSF funding is going to be catalytic and it's going to be a huge win for you, or whether it's going to be basically relatively non-important in your company's trajectory. And we're going to try to put our funding in those companies where it's going to make the biggest impact on their story. More information about any of this, there's a section of our website called, I think it's resources, and then it's called For Reviewers. So if you go to the resources tab at the top, drop down, and then there's a For Reviewers section. There's lots of information about the review process. And if you or anyone you know is interested in becoming a reviewer, you can't review if you have a proposal pending, but we're always interested in folks who can help us to conduct the review and make the best funding decisions possible. Our full proposal timeline it is relatively long. We're going to take about 3 months in general to do the full merit review process, a month to kind of do compliance checking and select reviewers, and then another month or 2 or maybe 3 to do all the discussions and give reviewers time to write their feedback. And then we'll do our own diligence, which may take another month or so. And so it's going to be typically 3 to 4 months before you hear anything, and it's most of the time 4 to 6 months to a final decision, closer to 6 months if you have an award. And if you're accepted, once the award is made, you'll have access to most of the $305,000 that you have requested. Just to remind you a few things here, we talked about registrations. Those registrations are all free, by the way, and so there's really not a lot of reason not to start them as soon as possible. The submission guide is a great resource. So there's a few places you can get it, but how to submit is the website here is there, and I think there's also if you also just go to the How It Works section of our website. 2 points of contact for any technical issues. So this is not questions about the content of the proposal, but questions about how to use our system specifically, how to navigate the website. Call the research.gov help desk at 800-381-1532 or email them at rgov@nsf.gov. A lot of the proposal is about the budget, and it's important to try to, do a good job with the budget, but I think a lot of folks get concerned that, somehow if they do something wrong on the budget, they're going to get the proposal returned or kicked out. The budget is something that almost always is not the key factor in whether we make an award. And so definitely try to give us a good sense about how you're going to spend the money, but don't worry about the miniature details of budget rules and categorizations. They're not that important for us, and we're almost always going to have to fix things about the budget later anyway. So do a good job with the budget, but don't get wrapped around the axle if you can. I will point out, we are agnostic about whether you want to get someone to help you with a proposal, but I will say that it's definitely not a requirement that you get either a third-party grant writer or use generative AI or other tools like that to support your proposal. Most of the awards we make in Phase I are to first-time applicants, and most of them, from what I can tell, are not using any help. Now, it's great to talk to folks, run your proposal by them, but I'm not sure you need somebody to kind of holistically take on the entire process on your behalf. We are trying to cater to new startups and first-time applicants, and so you're welcome to use folks like that, but I think the need to kind of have a veteran grant writer is less for our program than maybe it is other places. Last small tip here is that there are a few administrative pieces that happen at the very end of the submission process, like right before you finally get it done. And the best thing to remember is that you may feel like you're done, it may seem like you're done, you may not be sure what the status of your proposal is. The way to know that you are fully done submitting the proposal is that you're given a new number for the first time, a full proposal number. It will be 7 digits, and it will have the fiscal year as the first 2 digits. So in this case, it'll be 24 or 25, followed by 5 other numbers. So once you see that number, it does mean that your NSF has gotten your proposal. There may be things that we want you to change, so you should continue to monitor your email as the PI. But once you get that full proposal number, that is a sign that you are fully done. And the last thing I would say here is we do know that generative AI has become a bigger part of a lot of proposal and document writing. Just want to point out a few pieces around that is that we're encouraging you that if you are using generative AI, that you discuss how it was used preparing the proposal. It is important that if you do use a tool like that it does not get in the way of your voice as the entrepreneur. That's really the important voice for us. If you do use generative AI, it does not stop you from being responsible for the accuracy of all the statements that you're making in the process. If you include something in the proposal that is wrong, that is falsifiable or misleading even, it obviously is going to have an effect on the merit review process. And if there's something where you actually get funding and you get funding based on something in the proposal that's incorrect, that can also create even potential legal issues for you. So If you do use tools, grant writers or generative AI, you do need to go and check and make sure that all the content that was created continues to be accurate and that you would stand by every statement in the proposal. If you're interested in the rules around these things, the NSF policy manual is called the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, or PAPPG. You can definitely see more information there. The PAPPG is a public document that you can Google. And finally, you are welcome to have generative AI as a topic of study or as part of your actual company innovation in some cases. If you're interested in more information on generative AI, there's also a URL that is a broad NSF-wide notice to the community about this topic. Thanks a lot. Last thing I'll say here is for any programmatic questions, so questions about the proposal contents, the review process, any of those pieces, you can reach out to our team at SBIR@nsf.gov. That is manned by program directors and our support staff, and we try to respond to any questions there within a couple days. If you are going to reach out to either that website or to other program directors, you're welcome to do so, but I would encourage you, if you are going to reach out to multiple points of contact, to try to not put them on separate parallel email chains, because it can create a lot of extra work if 5 different people are responding to the same question. So feel free to reach out, but try to reach out in a way that that is efficient, if that makes sense. Thanks so much.